In this video I'm going to show you how to make more realistic hills. If you watched my Building a Terrain Table series, you saw how I used a hot wire foam cutter to carve out the cliff faces. For those of you who do not have a hot wire foam cutter, or you like a more realistic look, this tutorial is specifically aimed to help you accomplish that. So we're just going to be using pretty much normal everyday household items. There may be a few things that you don't have on hand readily, but for the most part these are just things that you would normally be using in regular terrain making. So I have a couple of different sizes of screwdrivers, my razor blade, drywall saw. This is probably what you don't just have laying around your house. Any thick toothed saw will be fine. If you have a hacksaw, feel free to use the blade for that. This was only, I think, $2.99, so you can pick it up at Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart, maybe even carry them, so something handy to pick up. This is a sanding tool. Again, this was cheap. It may have only been $2, and it has 80 grit sandpaper, 120 and 220, I believe, and it just velcros on the top. Very good for knocking off the edges. Pro Bond glue. This is just a glue all bottle, but it's actual Pro Bond glue that I've put inside there. And toothpicks. And you'll also need a metal ruler. Just pretend that this T-square part is not on here. You just need a heavy-duty metal ruler, and we'll be using that to chip off some of the edges. It actually makes some really nice cuts where you want to rip the foam off instead of using, say, your razor blade to get a really sharp cut. So that works well. And you will also need some foam. Now, I'm going to be using one piece of the 3/4 inch, which is on the bottom, and 4 pieces of the 2 inch. You can use the 3/4 inch foam if you would rather use that instead. It doesn't have to be the 2 inch, or you can mix and match. If you want to throw in some 2 inch in there, that's fine too. Excuse me, if you want to throw in some 3/4 inch. But I'm just going to be using the 4 2 inch pieces for this part. So the first thing we need to do, setting these aside for a moment, is decide how big we want our base to be. And I've decided to go with the 3/4 inch foam base. You can use MDF if you prefer. The reason that I've decided to go with this over the MDF is if I decide to cut off an edge, make this piece a little bit smaller, it's a whole lot easier to do it with foam and then sand it down than to get the project done and then decide that you want to cut the MDF, and that's just a big pain in the butt. The durability is fine. Let me just throw this everywhere. This is very sturdy, even though it looks like the edge may be easy to chip. Once we put our sealer on top of this, that's not going to go anywhere, and the overall piece will be lighter also using this as opposed to the MDF. So what I did was just take an arbitrary shape and drew it on the foam. I cut it out and used my sanding pad / block and went around the edges to give it a rounded surface. I didn't do that on camera just because it's such a mess sanding all this crap down. So that's the only thing that you need to do. There is no rhyme or reason to this shape or this size. This is just something that I sketched out, cut it, and sanded. So that was the first step. And now what we need to do is make sure that our first piece will fit on the flat area that we've sanded up to. Doesn't matter if it goes all the way to here, this size doesn't matter. As long as it fits on the flat area, we're fine. And looks like it does. So that's it for this. Then the other 3 pieces, you can have them hang off the side if you want. These, again, arbitrary old pieces that I just had laying around. We're going to be doing a lot of carving, so the appearance of these really makes no difference at all. Okay, we're ready to start gluing our pieces together now. So you take your big piece and set it to the side. We won't be using that until later on, until we have everything carved. So I've gone ahead and glued this first piece down. So I'm going to take the second piece. I'm going to give it a quick rub with the sandpaper to break that surface tension up. I'm going to do the same thing on here. Doesn't have to be a lot. So we don't really care how it's positioned on there. So we're going to glue this side. Now, as opposed to before in the Building a Terrain Table series, I told you to leave the spaces in between to let this dry faster. Well, I'm telling you to not do that for this one. Because we're going to be carving each of these pieces, it's possible that we would hit one of those air pockets where the glue would be drying, and that will leave a pretty significant, let me just drop that everywhere. That may leave a significant gap, and it's harder to fill in those big gaps than it is to deal with the glue that's sticking through. So just go ahead and cover the piece entirely. And when you have it covered, don't forget to put your toothpicks in like I almost did. Toothpicks we want to keep in the center, so we can avoid hitting the toothpicks when we're carving around the edges. And if you see the glue pulling up on the outside, again, don't worry about that. When we carve it, we'll get rid of all that. And then we'll do the same thing on this final piece. I'll do that off camera. And then we just need some kind of big weight to sit on the top, and then we need to let that dry for about 24 hours. Just because there are no air pockets inside, we want to make sure that this is good and firm. And then once that's dry, I'll be back and we'll start the carving process.